A very warm welcome to another brand new edition of World Panorama, the show that brings you up to speed with all the major news and events around the globe. I'm Teena Jha. Let's begin with the top stories this week. The United Nations decisively rejects US decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. India among 128 countries that backed the UN resolution. Trump administration says vote will have no effect on its plan to move American embassy to Jerusalem. The United States expresses concern over reports of Jamaat ud-Dawa chief Hafiz Saeed running for office in Pakistan. Angered by his release from house arrest, the United States calls for his immediate prosecution. United Nations imposes tough new sanctions on North Korea, heating its oil supplies. Exports of refined petroleum products to the country cut by nearly 90%. Sanctions following last month's ballistic missile test. And Donald Trump finally gets his way. US Senate approves the most sweeping overhaul of the US tax system in more than 3 decades. Democrats say it favors only the rich. Well, our top story this week, the United Nations General Assembly voted in favor of a resolution demanding that the United States rescind its 6 December declaration on Jerusalem. While Palestine called the vote a victory and thanked the UN member states for rejecting Trump's unilateral move, Israel condemned the vote and thanked Trump for his stance on Jerusalem. More details in this report.
The United Nations voted to reject US President Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Maintaining consistency on its policy on Palestine, India voted with 127 other countries in favor of the UNGA resolution. 9 voted in favor of the US decision, while 35 nations abstained from the vote. The text of the resolution said that any decision regarding the status of the city are null and void and must be cancelled.
The result of the vote is as follows. In favor, 128. Against, 9. Abstentions, 35. Draft Resolution A/ES-10/L22 is adopted.
The vote came after US Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, issued a direct threat saying that US will think twice before funding the world body if it voted to reject Trump's decision. Haley said that the US will put up its embassy in Jerusalem regardless of the vote.
America will put our embassy in Jerusalem. That is what the American people want us to do. And it is the right thing to do. No vote in the United Nations will make any difference on that. But this vote will make a difference on how Americans look at the UN and on how we look at countries who disrespect us in the UN. And this vote will be remembered.
This rare emergency special session was held by the 193-member UN General Assembly at the request of Arab and Muslim states. Meanwhile, Palestinian leaders called the vote a victory for Palestine and thanked the UN member states that rejected Trump's unilateral move despite all the pressure exerted on them. Many world leaders also rejected United States' stand on Jerusalem and called it a violation of international law. Jordanians celebrated the UNGA's decision.
تجاه الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية بل بسبب قرارها الذي يعد اعتداء على حق الشعب الفلسطيني الأصيل والطبيعي في مدينة القدس الشريف وعلى الأمة العربية وعلى جميع.
Before this meeting, a UN member state threatened all the other members. We were all asked to vote no or face the consequences. Some are even threatened with the development aid cut. Such an attitude is unacceptable.
Como capital del Estado de Israel, lo que constituye una grave violación de las resoluciones de Naciones Unidas sobre el tema y del derecho internacional.
Israel, however, rejected the UN vote and thanked Trump for his stance on Jerusalem.
Israel completely rejects this preposterous resolution. Jerusalem is our capital, always was, always will be. But I do appreciate the fact that a growing number of countries refuse to participate in this theater of the absurd. So I appreciate that, and especially I want to again express our thanks to President Trump and Ambassador Haley for their stalwart defense of Israel and their stalwart defense of the truth.
In addition to recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, Trump announced on December 6th that US would move its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. No country currently has its embassy in the city. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Pakistan has once again raised the Kashmir issue at the UN Security Council, this time by linking it to the Palestinian crisis. Participating in an open debate at the UNSC, Pakistan's permanent representative to the UN, Maliha Lodhi, raised the issue. She said the challenges to international peace and security are intensifying at a time when the foundations of global order are fraying. Speaking ahead of the upcoming General Assembly emergency session on Jerusalem, Maliha Lodhi said, and I quote, "The Palestinian and Kashmiri people continue to suffer horrific human rights violations at the hands of occupying forces, while the world continues to watch without addressing these egregious situations." Maliha Lodhi's attempt comes after her last failed effort to raise the Kashmir issue at the UN when she held up the picture of an injured Palestinian girl, claiming that she was a Kashmiri. And India indirectly targeted Pakistan and China during a United Nations discussion, saying that some members failed to understand the common threat of terrorism and have narrow political and strategic concerns. India's permanent representative to the UN, Syed Akbaruddin, said, "Terrorism is a common challenge which requires greater focus by this council," and asked for an international cooperation. Syed Akbaruddin was participating in an open debate on addressing complex contemporary challenges to international peace and security on Wednesday at the UN Council. He was apparently referring to China's decision to repeatedly block a move by India to designate Masood Azhar as a global terrorist. Akbaruddin also pointed out that the UN-designated terrorist and Mumbai attack mastermind Hafiz Saeed was seeking to contest elections in Pakistan. However, China has rejected the assertion that the move to list Masood Azhar as a global terrorist were blocked due to narrow political considerations, saying it acted in a candid way over the issue based on rules and procedures. And India's remarks at the UN came soon after the US expressed concern over Jamaat-ud-Dawa chief Hafiz Saeed running for office in Pakistan. US State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert told media persons that the US considers the JUD a terror organization. Angered by Saeed's release from house arrest last month, the United States had called for his immediate prosecution. The State Department spokesperson also reminded Pakistan that Hafiz Saeed, who founded the terror group Lashkar-e-Taiba, carries a bounty of $10 million for terror activities. Hafiz Saeed allegedly masterminded the 2008 Mumbai terror attacks, in which 166 people, including 6 Americans, were killed.
A man who is affiliated with LET, Lashkar-e-Taiba, one of the terror groups. It's a group that the United States government considers to be a terror organization. We have many good conversations with the government of Pakistan. One of the things that happened recently is that this guy was held on house arrest. Pakistan released him from house arrest. And now there's word that he may be running for some sort of office. I want to remind folks, we have a $10 million reward for justice program that would reward for information that would bring him to justice. So I want to make that clear so that everybody knows $10 million out for this guy, and we would certainly have concerns about him running for office.
And on to another major news story of the week. The United Nations Security Council has voted unanimously to impose tougher sanctions on North Korea in response to its recent ballistic missile tests. China and Russia, North Korea's main trading partners, voted in favor of the resolution. The country is already subject to a raft of sanctions from the United States, the UN and the European Union. The new set of US drafted sanctions will further strangle North's energy supplies and tighten restrictions on smuggling and the use of North Korean workers overseas. Nikki Haley, the US ambassador to the UN, claimed that the new sanctions went even further than sanctions passed in September that at that time were called the toughest. She said the UN had repeatedly offered Pyongyang a choice, and repeatedly in its continued missile tests, the regime had chosen the path of isolation. US President Donald Trump also welcomed the resolution. He tweeted, "The world wanted peace, not death."
Their arrogance and hostility to anything productive has set their country on a destructive path. 9 times before today, we have asked the North Korean regime to choose the path of peace. And if they do, we would welcome them back into the community of nations. But Pyongyang has chosen the path of isolation. As we have in the past, we will continue to match the Kim regime's choice of aggressive actions with actions of international sanction.
And it's time for a very short break here on the program. On the other side, US Senate approves the most sweeping overhaul of the country's tax system in more than 3 decades.
On this edition of Policy Watch, we will take a look at the hits and misses in the Indian economy in 2017.
Constitutional approval of the GST and its implementation was definitely one of the major hits.
We continue to be very low on investment.
If you solve this NPA problem in the banks, that will certainly go a long way.
But the stock market's current performance is out of line with the reality.
For the country as a whole, achieving low inflation during this year was, I would say, a hit.
Mihir Sen, an outstanding and extraordinary saltwater swimmer of India. He is the first Asian to swim the English Channel way back in 1958. And just 8 years later, in 1966, he swam the 7 seas of the 5 continents in 1 calendar year, which etched his name in the Guinness Book of World Records. In 1959, he was also conferred the Padma Shri, and in 1967, he was awarded the Padma Bhushan.
Welcome back. The US Senate has approved the most sweeping overhaul of the US tax system in more than 3 decades. Republicans say that the tax cuts for corporations, small businesses and individuals will boost economic growth. But the Democrats, who all voted against it, say it is designed to benefit only the rich people. Here's a report.
The US Senate passed a sweeping $1.5 trillion tax bill, the biggest overhaul of the US tax code in more than 30 years. The bill, which includes permanent tax breaks for corporations and temporary tax cuts for individuals, was passed by a narrow margin of 51 to 48, with all Democrats united in opposition.
On this vote, the ayes are 51, the nays are 48. The Senate recedes from its amendment and concurs in H.R. 1. With further amendment, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is passed.
Earlier, the House of Representatives passed the bill with a comfortable majority of 227 to 203 votes. For final approval, the legislation must go back to the House for a procedural issue before it can be sent to the White House for the President to sign it into law.
I want to start off by thanking the American people, our constituents, for sending us here to do this work for them. This is one of the most important pieces of legislation that Congress has passed in decades to help the American worker, to help grow the American economy. This is profound change, and this is change that is going to put our country on the right path. For all those millions of men and women in America who are living paycheck to paycheck, who are struggling to get ahead, help is on the way.
This win in the Senate is the most significant legislative victory of 2017 for U.S. President Donald Trump and the congressional Republicans.
I have to say that this is a historic night. The Democrats have said that the American people will remember this night. I hope they do, because we passed one of the most important tax breaks in this country's history. And these folks here behind us all have contributed and helped make this a possibility.
If enacted, the legislation will represent the most drastic changes to the U.S. tax code since 1986. Among the biggest gainers due to this bill are multinational corporations. Under the legislation, the federal corporate tax rate would fall from 35% to 21%, and the maximum individual income tax rate for the nation's wealthiest would drop from 39.6% to 37%. The Democratic opposition has denounced the legislation, calling it a giveaway to the wealthy and business community that will widen the income gap between the rich and the poor.
What a disgrace. That's what this bill is. It's an absolute disgrace. There is no reason for a single middle-class family to pay more while every single corporation pays less. If you wanted to help the middle class, give them a real tax break. The rich get far more dollars back than the middle class. That is fact, irrefutable fact.
The Republican-controlled U.S. House of Representatives will now give a final approval to the tax bill and send it to the President to sign into law, well in time for him to deliver what he has promised would be a big, beautiful Christmas present for America. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And on to our next story. Elections to the regional parliament in Catalonia have thrown the region into a huge political and economic uncertainty. The elections have given the three pro-independence parties that include former Catalan President Carles Puigdemont party a slight majority, and the three parties must now form a coalition to form a government. However, Spanish Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy has rebuffed an offer of talks from Puigdemont in the wake of secessionist victory at the polls.
Christmas spirit in Barcelona. People walking through a lively Christmas market in the Catalan capital, unfazed by the ongoing political crisis here. Concern over the situation in Catalonia has escalated after the secessionists secured a slim majority in the regional elections, winning 70 of the 135 seats and deepening the split between separatist parties and the Spanish government. The party of former Catalan President Carles Puigdemont won 34 seats. Puigdemont described the vote as a slap in the face for Spanish Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy. He called for a meeting with Rajoy in Brussels, where he is living in self-imposed exile.
Je ne demande pas à la Commission européenne qu'il change d'avis, qu'elle ne change pas d'avis. Elle a le droit de soutenir la recette de Mariano Rajoy, même si cette recette ne marche pas, ne marche plus. Mais quand même, je ne lui demande pas de changer. Je lui demande seulement.
However, Spain's Prime Minister Rajoy has rebuffed calls to meet for new talks outside the country. Rajoy said that he would negotiate with whoever became the new head of the Catalan government, but they would have to take up their post in Catalonia.
El Gobierno de España quiere ofrecer toda su colaboración y toda su mejor voluntad de diálogo constructivo, abierto y realista, siempre dentro de la ley, al Gobierno que se constituya en Cataluña.
Rajoy also said that the winner of Thursday's election was Ines Arrimadas, the leader of the Citizens Party, which wants Catalonia to remain a semi-autonomous part of Spain. It is noteworthy that after the elections, the Citizens Party emerged as Catalonia's biggest party, winning 37 seats in the 135-seat chamber. But it is separatist parties who can form a government by forming a coalition. Citizens Party insists that the results show that there is no separatist majority in Catalonia.
Desde el día de ayer ya decíamos que estábamos ante una situación histórica y ayer vimos que el resultado de estas elecciones también ha sido histórico. Es la primera vez que en Cataluña un partido constitucionalista gana las elecciones en escaños y en votos.
Prime Minister Rajoy had called the election after separatists who dominated the previous Catalan parliament declared independence on 27th of October after a referendum that was declared illegal by Spain. In an attempt to stop that referendum, Spanish police stormed some polling stations, leading to violent clashes with hundreds of people reported injured. However, Rajoy's goal of containing the Catalan separatist movement through these elections has backfired, putting further uncertainty for Catalonia region.
Sin darles la razón a unos ni a otros, a Cataluña le han hecho mucho daño con esto de la independencia. Porque todas las tiendas, si preguntas a todas las tiendas, están vacías porque la gente tiene miedo. Tiene miedo del gasto. Yo no entro ni salgo en temas de esto. Pero puestos a elegir pertenecer a un país, prefiero pertenecer.
What makes matters further unsettled is that the separatist parties are not exactly a coherent bloc, and if they fail to form a government by April next year, there would be yet another election. The election result is also a setback for the European Union, which must now brace for more secessionist noise as it grapples with the disruption of Brexit and simmering East European discontent. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And much else unfolded around the world this week. Here's a quick roundup of some other international news in GlobeWatch. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday accused the United States of plotting to withdraw from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which bans short and intermediate range land-based nuclear and conventional missiles. Both Russia and the United States have accused each other of breaking the landmark arms control treaty that helped end the Cold War and have said its existence is now under threat. British Prime Minister Theresa May's senior-most minister Damian Green resigned at her request after an internal investigation found that he made misleading comments about pornography found on computers in his office. The resignation is a serious blow for May as she navigates the final year of Brexit negotiations before Britain's exit in March 2019. The World Bank has raised its forecast for China's economic growth in 2017 from 6.7% to 6.8%, based on rising household incomes and improving external demand. This was the World Bank's second upward revision for China this year, after it first revised the projection from 6.5% to 6.7% in April. US, Japanese and Russian astronauts arrived at the International Space Station this week. Commander Anton Shklaprov of Roscosmos and flight engineers Norishige Kanai of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency and Scott Tingle of NASA docked their Soyuz spacecraft. The docking completed their two-day journey following Sunday's blast-off from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. The former Archbishop of Boston, Cardinal Bernard Law, who became a symbol of the Roman Catholic Church's worldwide sexual abuse scandals, died aged 86 on Wednesday. Law had been living in Rome and was in declining health in recent years. The cause of the death is not clear, but sources close to Law said he had been suffering from complications of diabetes, liver failure and pericardial effusion. And let's now shift gears and bring you up to speed with all the sports news you might have missed in our segment Sports Action. The International Olympic Committee said on Friday that it had banned 11 Russian athletes for life after they committed doping offences at the 2014 Sochi Winter Games. That includes speed skaters Ivan Skobrev, a two-time medalist at the Vancouver 2010 Games. Players are also stripped of their medals and banned from future Olympic events. The decision is part of an IOC investigation into doping of Russian athletes at the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia. Barcelona forward Lionel Messi won his fourth Pichichi Trophy at an award ceremony held by Marca Sports newspaper. He scored 37 goals in the Spanish league during 2016-17 season, which helped him grab the award. Messi, who is currently the highest goal scorer in this season's La Liga, also received the Alfredo Di Stefano Trophy for the league's best player. France's former Wimbledon champion Madelyn Bartoli announced her return to professional tennis in 2018 after more than 4 years of retirement. She confirmed her return to the women's tour in a video posted on her official Twitter account. Bartoli quit the sport in 2013, saying her body could no longer keep up with the demands of the sport. She had won 8 WTA singles titles, finished runner-up at the Wimbledon in 2007 and reached the semi-finals of the French Open in 2011. Athletics anti-doping officials began an investigation after allegations came about American sprinter Justin Gatlin and his team of supplying performance-enhancing drugs. Gatlin came under scanner after a British newspaper did an undercover operation in which Gatlin's coach and an agent who has worked with him indicated that they could procure performance-enhancing drugs. Players from Manchester City's men and women's teams visited the Royal Manchester Children's Hospital. The players distributed presents to hundreds of children on their annual visit to the hospital. The visit forms part of the club's long-standing relationship with the hospital. This season, patients have taken part in Manchester City's official team photo, attended VIP match day experiences and met the squad during special wish-granting days. And finally, before we end our program, we leave you with visuals that are sure to cheer you up. These penguins are showcasing their antics at an ice show in a theme park in China's Harbin city, drawing crowds of tourists to the show. You picture this as we take your leave. Thanks for your time.